Hi everybody, my name is Jeff McLaughlin and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is June 1st, 1984, and I'm very grateful for that. The first thing I'd like to do is thank Karen for inviting me to speak. Providing service in AA of any kind is always an honor and a privilege, but when I get to do it at my home group, it's even more fun for me, so thank you. I'd like to start tonight with a couple of stories. They're old jokes, but they serve a really good purpose in my sobriety. So if you'll kind of bear with me. Did you hear the one about the redneck who passed away and left his entire estate in trust for his beloved widow? The caveat was she had to be 14 before she could touch it. They get better. How do you know when you're staying in Mississippi? When you call down to the front desk and say, I got a leak in the sink, and the man says, okay, go ahead. The last one, okay. Torture's almost over. Did you hear they raised the drinking limit in Tennessee to 32? Seems they're trying to get alcohol out of the high schools. Okay. I'd like to start with the idea that I am what I think, what I feel, what I believe, and how I behave. Tonight I'm going to tell you a little bit about my life before AA, what happened, and what it's like today. My childhood was basically a disaster. Neither of my parents drank excessively, but both of my grandfathers were alcoholics. So when my parents got together, we grew up in alcoholism. All the anger, the distrust, the lying, there was no sense of love, emotional or touching. Trust and security were non-existent. And so that was my childhood. But I will tell you one more important thing. We were very good Catholics. On the outside, we looked great. On the inside, it was a completely different story. Traditional Irish Catholic childhood. Life started pretty young with physical abuse. My dad got a belt from some buddy of his out in Wyoming. It had our name spelled on it. It was about 1-inch letters. Now there's 13 letters in my last name. You got any idea how long and how much belt that is? It hurt when he hit me. But I was a pretty smart kid even when I was young. I lost some of that along the way, but I figured out that when he hit me, if I cried after 3 hits, he'd stop. But I also learned if I detected 1 ounce of fatigue in his face when he walked in the back door that night, he could hit me and I would never cry until finally he would say, this is hurting me more than it's hurting you. Get out of here. And he'd be rubbing his shoulder. And I thought, I got him. I own him. I beat him at his own game. He can't hurt me ever again. Well, that wasn't completely accurate, but the idea was that I found something in me that was greater than what he had in him. And I used that for 30 or 40 more years. It turned out to be the worst lesson that a child could learn, because when I wanted something from people, I just used them. That's the only way I can put it. I lied, I cheated, I stole from them, whatever it was, that's how I survived. And the consequences were always very bad. The reason I told you those jokes to begin with is because I want you to see who I really am. Those jokes were hurtful. They were demeaning. People could be very offended by somebody talking about them. I don't know, I haven't heard these in years, but there used to be Irish jokes, Jewish jokes, Italian jokes, Polish jokes. They were just a run of the mill. That was the way of life. My difference was that I did it intentionally to hurt people. That's how I thought I fit in. I brought people down to my level, and I thought I was the funniest man on earth. Turns out that those people weren't leaving and cutting me out of their lives because I was funny. I was disgusting. But I didn't know that until I got to this program. I never fit in. The only life I knew was anger and distrust. When I was in school in the 50s, the school was on a calendar year, not a school year. So that meant my birthday's between Christmas and New Year's. I was in a grade where my friends, 3 of my friends, had birthdays in January. So they were 1 full year ahead of me, mentally, physically, athletically, whatever it was. They had experience, they had knowledge and growth that I wasn't going to get for a while. So I had a horrible time trying to keep up. And I already had kind of a bad taste in my mouth for life, so it just seemed perfectly normal that I was a loser. And that's the way I approached life for almost 40 years. I had no place to go and hide. I knew I couldn't go home. There was nothing there. And in grade school, what's the choice? Well, I found it. I have a friend named Jeff, and one summer, I was over at his house, and his brother was loading 6-packs from cars into a pickup truck, and he said, "Come on, you guys are going to go work." So we asked him if we'd get paid, and he said, "No, I'm not paying you." Fair is fair, so we took a 6-pack. I drank the first one. My friend's name was Jeff. He drank the first one. Honest to God, I thought it was gasoline. It tasted terrible. But I wouldn't quit because he was doing okay, so I was going to do okay. The second one was smooth as silk, and it took me to a place I'd never been before. It was peaceful. It was serene. I felt completely safe. There was no threat of any kind. And I can remember I was standing on a beach with the ocean, and the sun was about 5:30 in the afternoon. It was the most beautiful place, the gentle breeze blowing, and I had no problems. I don't know how long it lasted, but I know when the can of beer ran out, I couldn't wait to get to the third one and get it back. Again, that was false evidence. Appearing real. I wasn't afraid of it, but the idea was I spent the next 39 years chasing that second can of beer, and I never got back to it. I never did find it. One of the things, that was between 7th and 8th grade, the summer between 7th and 8th grade. So I don't know, I was 10, 11 years old, something like that. One thing that I can tell you that I don't think a lot of people had done, I quit smoking and drinking to play 8th grade basketball for my school. So I'd been smoking for a few years before I started drinking, but I wanted to be on that team, and I needed to be able to run, and I needed to be able to think. And the easiest way to do that was to get in shape, was to quit smoking and drinking. And so I did. The day we played for the city tournament, I had a 12-pack and a pack of cigarettes waiting for me out in the car after the game. And I went right back to doing what I did best. I started high school and 9th grade, and I noticed that a lot of my friends from grade school, they weren't coming around and they weren't calling, and I wasn't being invited to things. So I was forced to find new people to drink with. I lived on the west side. I went to the south side, drank down there for a few months. They got rid of me, so I went to the north side, drank up there for a while. And I got through my freshman year and summer, and then I went back for my sophomore year, and they had a new priest at this school. And honestly, I don't remember when. It was in the first semester, but I was molested. And that was a game changer for life. Everything looked different. My problem was I couldn't go home and tell my parents because they were just... One of my friends described my dad as maniacal Catholic, which means he was a maniac about the Catholic Church. And I'm not so sure that she wasn't more right than wrong. So the idea was then, I had no place to go. I had nothing, nobody I could tell. So I decided that I wanted to run away. I went home at the end of that semester and said, I'm never going back to that school again. And when I get work, I'll write and tell you where I am. And so the idea was that they were completely taken off guard. So a few weeks later, they said, let's make a deal. You have to graduate from high school. And I said, okay, what do you think? And they said, well, let's find a school you can go to. So we drove around the Midwest. I think we went to 4 or 5 schools, and I just said no. Nope, 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 not this one, not this one. We were in Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, and I just drove in the driveway and said, nope, not this one. And then the God of my understanding smiled, and we went to Kansas. Now, I think I'm like 15 years old, but I know Kansas is an 18th state for beer. Pulled up in front of the school, and I said, oh, I love this. It's all right. I am home. I didn't tell them I was home, but I thought, this is sweet. So a couple weeks later, we packed my bags. I moved into Moore Hill High School in Atchison, Kansas, and I was on that campus maybe a week. And this kid came up to me and he said, you drink? And I said, yep. And he said, you need an ID? I said, yep. He said, give me $10. Took my picture. 2 weeks later, Wisconsin State ID with my picture. Said I was 18 years old and I was good to go for the next 2 years. It was the perfect life. I didn't do too bad in school. I didn't apply myself, but I was one of those guys that could get C's with just minimal, efforts, and that was good enough for me. My life was neither fun nor happy. The only thing I could really trust was anger, distrust, and fear. Moving fast forward just for a second. On the 4th step inventory, it says there are 63 different ways to be afraid. As I looked through that, when I did my first 4th step, I found my favorite, fear of fear itself. And basically, for me, that definition is, I am terrified of living life. I have nothing solid that I can hold on to. I don't know where to go or how to make friends. I don't know anything about taking care of myself. And so I drank. And I drank more, and I drank more, and I drank more. I got out of high school, and I went to 3 different colleges, 3 different semesters, and one I got straight incompletes, 2 I just flunked out of. About that time, the Vietnam conflict was extremely unpopular, but the government was conscripting people like me, and I got my letter. If you don't know conscription, it means that you get a letter that says, we have chosen you to go in the Army. And there's only one way to get around it. Some people went to Canada. I said, okay. But I said, a buddy of mine got his 3 days before I did. We were having a beer and we were talking about it. And he said, what are you going to do? And I said, I do not live in jungles. No way. I'm not doing that. And we decided that the next morning we'd go down and join the Navy because that was okay. We could take those unopened letters. They were big envelopes, red, white, and blue trim around the edges. It was not a secret. Department of Defense was the return address. And so we went down to the Navy, handed them the envelope, and said, we want to sign up. The guy got up, walked the envelopes across the hall to the Army guy, said, check them off, I got them. I spent 4 years in the Navy. The next 3.5 years I lived at sea on a ship. It was a great life. I had good friends and got to see a lot of the world. The most important lesson I learned, though, was my drinking caused a lot of problems. I used people, and they didn't like being used. I'd go over, going on the beach, it was like getting off the ship and going ashore. I'd go over on the beach every other day. We'd work 24 and we were off 24. And when I was on the beach, I drank and I drank hard. And my friends had to take care of me. And they did that. But when we got back out to sea, I got full knowledge of how angry they were. They called me a drunk, an Irish drunk. They called me everything that they wanted to, and my response was, yeah, you know, you're probably right. I may have a drinking problem. I may be a Irish drunk. I don't know, but that's who I am. So the next port, we repeated the process over and over and over for 3.5 years until I left the ship and came home. I got an honorable discharge. I never really got into any real trouble during those years. And so when I got back, I went to San Diego, and I was living there, and I signed up to go to college. I went 1 semester drinking very heavily. I got all A's and B's. I had never gotten an A or a B in my entire life, starting in kindergarten through present day. And you know what happened? Drinking was more appealing than school, so I never went back. I hung out there for a little while, and then my parents called and said, why don't you come back to Des Moines? We'd like to have you. Been gone for 4 or 5 years. We'd like to have you a little closer to home. And I thought, yeah, you know, why not? I don't have anything important going on today. So my brother was going to college in Denver, so I drove to Denver and pulled in and called him, and we went out for dinner, and I stayed a couple days. And the last night I was in town, we went to this restaurant, and we walked through the front door, and from clear over there in the corner, I mean, it had to be 10 tables deep. I hear, McLaughlin, you SOB, get over here. 3 of my buddies from Moore Hill live in Denver, got a little business. I had several little businesses. One was pretty legal, the others were questionable. But you know what? It took another year to get out of Denver. I drank every day. We moved a few used cars once in a while, got some more money. I had a little part-time job, didn't amount to anything. But I was introduced to marijuana. I can honestly tell you that it wasn't one of my big deals. I smoked it because it was fun. When I got to Iowa, I asked a buddy of mine if I could get a bag of Acapulco Gold, and he said, sure, give me $10. Next night at a party, he said, here's your weed. I smoked the entire bag and never got off the platform. I think it was leaves, to be honest with you. So I looked at myself and I thought, you know, this is a felony. I'm not doing this crap if it's not going to work. So I never smoked another joint. But I kept drinking because that wasn't illegal. It seemed pretty normal to me. During that time, I was in and out of work for about 10 years. And during that time, I met a really nice lady, and I married her. She was a really good drinker, and I knew I'd never have to go home at 10 o'clock. So we had a really good marriage for about 6 years, and then I hit the bottom. I just crashed. And what happened was I'd have 5 or 6 jobs a year, sometimes a week, sometimes a month. Just could not figure out how to maintain. So I was at a point in my drinking where once in a while I was noticing these little bugs on the floor. And I would look, and there wasn't anything there. And pretty soon those bugs got to be kind of plentiful. And they were on the walls and the ceilings, and some of them were on me. And then snakes started showing up. And they were all over me, all over you, inside my house, outside my house. If I closed my eyes, they were there. It seems that I was having a problem with reality because my physical well-being was so bad that nothing was working. The idea was that as this was starting to develop, I was still getting part-time jobs. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I get a little weird. And I've kind of classified my working life when I was drinking. And I started with the worst jobs I could ever imagine having. I had them. And there were some kind of moderate jobs, and then there were 1 or 2, pretty high-profile, good jobs. And the best of the worst jobs I had, and I thought this was a joke the whole time I was doing it, but I was hired to wash garbage trucks when they came back from their routes. I got to tell you, you can't talk about that at dinner. You can't sit over a beer and say, yeah, man, I got 4 of those trucks out in no time at all. Nobody cares. So I got fired for being drunk on the job. That ended that. But another part of that is my wife and I, we had a baby, and we survived. During that time, I also got a job in the state. I'm from Des Moines, Iowa, and I got a job in Illinois, and my background is banking and finance. It was managing a credit card franchise company for the state of Illinois, and I did that for about 4 years. That was a real blessing. I was on the road Sunday night through Thursday night, work hard all day, drink hard all night, get up and go again. We had a baby about a year before we moved back. I don't know if some of you don't. There was a grain embargo against Russia in the early 1980s. President Carter said, we are not selling grain to Russia unless they change their ways. Well, when the Midwest farmers can't sell their grain, they can't pay the banks. 700 banks went belly up in like 6 months in the Middle West because nobody had any money. Well, my host was a bank for this franchise, so it went under, and so did I. My wife and I looked for jobs, and there was nothing until my neighbor was the superintendent of a coal mine about 5 miles outside of town. One Saturday afternoon, he came over and said, hey, you know what? I got to hire 12 guys. He said, I'm embarrassed to ask you if you want a job, but he said, if you need one, I'll hire you. He said, you ever been in a coal mine? And I said, nope. He said, well, grab a beer. Come on, we'll get in the truck and we'll drive out. We did. We got on his golf cart. We went down about 450, 500 feet and started driving around. And he said, what do you think? And I said, I think we get the hell out of here right now. He said, okay, be in my office Monday morning at 8 o'clock. And I was. So I worked in that coal mine for a year. I got blown up once. I cut off the end of a finger. And I said, the third strike might be a fastball. And if it hits me, I'm out of here. So I quit. The baby was born. We moved back to Des Moines. My thought was, we'll get somebody to take care of us for a couple of years and see what happens. Well, it didn't work out that way. I was back into get a job, do whatever for a week or two, get fired, quit, just don't show up. There was all kinds of reasons that I didn't keep jobs. It was that I got a little out of sequence there. It was after that time that the bugs and the snakes started showing up. I had a plan. I really was having trouble living, and I didn't think that I could take much more. So I decided that I was going to kill 3 people, revenge, 1 a mercy killing, and myself. Fortunately, a God that I hated prevented that from ever happening. But I'd called a friend of mine a couple weeks before, and she and I drank together for 30 years. And I said to her, Sheila, you got to tell me about your life. She's got 2 years more than I have. And so she said, okay, let's have coffee tomorrow morning. And we did. And she said, Jeff, let's just go to some meetings together. So for about 2 weeks, we went to I'd meet her at the meeting place, and we'd go in and sit down. And quite honestly, the first AA meeting I ever went to, I went downstairs into this basement room, and I knew every third person in the room. I'd been drinking with them all my life. And so, you would think that I'd be really comfortable. They were all, oh, glad we've been saving a chair, all the, standard stuff. I was terrified beyond description. Knowing people made no difference whatsoever. I was out of control, and I didn't know what to expect. At the end of the meeting, we said the Our Father. Guy next to me, good friend, turned around and gave me a hug. This is not what I'm in for. This is not okay. Nobody told me that everybody hugs everybody. So I thought it was a little bit of a screw job, you know. I don't know what to do here. So then Sheila said, oh yeah, everybody hugs everybody. The hug creates the longest memory. It's the touching. And a body will remember being touched the longest, more than any other feeling. And that's why I was told that everybody hugs everybody. I believe it today. Couple weeks of meetings, and I called Sheila and I said, this is not working. Nothing's changing. And she said, okay, let's have coffee. Went to the same place, had a cup of coffee, and she said, you need to go to treatment. Your body is such a wreck. You got to get fixed. And I said, okay. So I drove down to the treatment center and went in about 10 o'clock and asked if I could sign up. And they said, well, sure, come on in, sit over here. We'll be in and talk to you. You know what an assessment room looks like. It has all the questions in the free world, and I was going to lie about them, so who cared? Until they came to the two questions that were really kind of important. And they said, have you ever thought about hurting yourself? And I said, suicide? They said, yeah. I said, yeah, every day for the past year. And they said, have you ever thought about hurting someone else? Crucial mistake. Don't ever do this. I said, do you want to see my list? Oh, the nature of that meeting changed dramatically. They wouldn't let me leave. They got off work at 4 o'clock and I was still there. I was too afraid of people to just get up and walk out. I promised them I'd be back tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. They said, no. You'll kill somebody before you come back. I said, no, I promise you, I won't do that. So anyway, they went home and I went home. I told my wife. She was the least impressed of all. She said, you don't need to do that, you're fine. And I said, I don't think so, I'm going to do it. And she said, well, I'm not taking you there. I got to be at work at 8 o'clock. So I said, okay. She said, you go tell your parents, maybe they'll help you. So we had dinner and went over to my folks' house. And it was about 7:30 in the evening, and I said, you know, I've got a problem with alcohol. I'm an alcoholic, and I'm going in for treatment to get better. And my mother looked at me and she said, don't you ever use that word in my house again. Now remember, her dad was an alcoholic, so she had some history, and she didn't like it. And she said, you know, I'm leaving for Minnesota tomorrow morning. We girls are going up and play bridge for 2 weeks. We had a home in Minnesota at the time. And she said, I'm not disrupting my plans for you. That's pretty customary from my childhood through age 39. You don't get it. You just don't get it when you need it. So myself, my wife, and my mom are looking at my dad. And he said, don't get me involved in this. I said, okay. And then we just sat in silence for a few minutes. He said, okay, I'll pick you up at 9 o'clock. Be ready. We're not going to mess around here. I said, okay. I was ready. He was there. Went down to the treatment center. It was on the 4th floor. We got off the elevator. Calamity strikes. A lifelong friend, grade school through drinking as adults, comes around the corner and says, oh my God, McLaughlin, we've been saving beds for you for years. Glad to see you. That's not what I needed at that moment. You could feel the heat coming out of my father's body. But it got worse. They put me in a room. They sent a nurse in to check my luggage. It never occurred to me they were going to search me. And I found out something new about myself. I thought I had an alcohol problem. But he was going through this suitcase, and he said, oh, what's this? Bottle of Dristan. I said, oh, you know, when I smoke or I drink, I just don't breathe well. So I use those, and everything gets better. Well, by the time he stopped counting, there were 7 brand new bottles of Dristan on the bed. And he looked at me and he said, how long are those going to last? And I said, oh, I'll have Dad bring 7 more next Wednesday. Bad choice. Really a bad choice. He picked them up and started to leave, and I said, hey, mine. Leave those here. He said, no, 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 no. If somebody else got these and took them and got sick, we'd be responsible for it. I said, oh, yeah, it never dawned on me. Okay. He said, you can get them at the nurse's desk anytime you want. I said, okay. A couple hours later, walked up to the nurse's desk, said, I need two Dristan. She said, nope, doctor said no more Dristan. Well, you can imagine, that was not a happy moment. I'm terrified. I've been doing a bottle a day for 10, 12 years. So I had to rethink it. And I knew if I left, I was a dead man, so I stayed. 1 week to the day, the only way I know how to describe this is, if you picture a crystal bowl that shatters, but it does not lose its shape, that's what my head felt like. I've never had a migraine, but if I had, it would be 1,000 times more painful. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I went to small group and never said a word. My small group mates kind of took care of me for 7 days, and that was my best. And during that week, the counselor was pretty smart. He said, each day, you have to talk to 3 people for 5 minutes each. You got to see, I was not a social person. I was so afraid of people that I didn't talk at all. And the first week, not only did I have a horrible headache, I didn't talk. The week came up and he said, how'd you do? I said, didn't talk to anybody. He said, well, you got the same assignment next week. The second week, my group mates and other people on the floor would come over and sit down and talk to me so that I could say at the end of the week, yeah, I talked to 3 people a day for 5 minutes. My best effort was, yeah, okay. What? No. That was my part of the conversation. That was all I was willing to give because I did not want anybody to see who I am. By the end of the treatment period, I was in a much better shape to take care of things like that. When I went into the treatment center, I think it's safe to say that I was mentally, spiritually, and emotionally dead. There was no activity. And my body was so beat up and torn up that it was not capable of taking care of itself. So they had me on vitamins, they fed me well when I would eat, and at the end of a 28-day treatment period, they let me go home. I called Sheila, I told her what was going on, and I met her at a meeting, and her husband was there. Now, I didn't know anything about AA, and I said to Sheila, I need you to be my sponsor, somebody I can trust. And she said, no, women sponsor women, men sponsor men. And I said, okay. She said, do you know Jack, my husband? And I said, no. You want to be my sponsor? And he said, yes. And you know what? That was the greatest gift God had given me to date in my life. Jack's a great man. Sheila and Jack and I are still the best of friends. I see him from time to time, and it's like, just like everybody else. Like we'd seen each other yesterday. The interesting thing at this point in my life was, I told you that I drank 3 cans of beer when I first drank. The last time I got drunk, I was sitting in my kitchen. I drank 3 cans of beer, and I fell off the chair. I was so drunk. My tolerance had gone from nothing to whatever it was, back to nothing. And I was drunk like I was if I drank a bottle of scotch or something. I always found that kind of coincidental, God incidental, or just really strange. But that's how my drinking career ended. About 18 months into sobriety, I knew that my wife had been dating a coworker for about a year. We got divorced, and 90 days later, she announced that her boyfriend was being transferred from Des Moines to Fayetteville, North Carolina. And she was taking Megan, our 4-year-old daughter, with her. Now I was trying to work the steps, and I was trying to learn AA and do all of that stuff. But this was the first time I really had to take a hard look at me and a hard look at my life. Because I was always used to getting something out of a deal. I could worm something out of everybody. I went to 5 agencies in the city of Des Moines, and every one of them said, can't help you. The baby's clean, she's well fed, she's well dressed, and her mother's a capable mother. The day that they left for North Carolina was the most painful day I've ever lived. And the only reason I think I'm here today is because my AA friends came and got me. They'd call me up and they would say, be on the corner. I had an apartment at that time. They'd say, be on the corner in 10 minutes. In the beginning, I knew the voices. I'd hang up. I didn't wait 10 minutes. I went down right now. I was afraid I'd miss the car. Car'd pull up, door would open, I'd get in. We'd go to a meeting. After the meeting, we'd go to a place called Poppin' Fresh Pies, and we'd have pie, or we'd have cake, ice cream, coffee, and we'd have the meeting after the meeting. And that's where they talked, where everybody talked. But that's where I really, really got an understanding of what this program is and how to go about living it. The thing that I really like to say here at this time is those people forced me to take actions so I could prove to myself I can survive this. Because I was used to quitting. I was used to lying and running. That was the only life I'd ever known. But they came and got me. We went to meetings. We went out socializing. We went and helped people move. I helped people paint houses and apartments. Anything that came along in the form of service, my sponsor took me. He didn't send me. He didn't say, go help him, and then call me when you're finished. We went together. He demonstrated AA. He proved to me that if I would change, take unfamiliar actions, I could have what he had and what everybody else had. And that's what saved my life. Steps 1, 2, and 3. I had to figure out that it wasn't all about me. There was a power greater than me, and he was working in my life whether I hated him or loved him. But that was the beginning of my real transformation from alcoholic drunk to alcoholic recovery. After they moved, and after I kind of got my life back in order a little bit, I went to my sponsor and I said, you know, I think I may have overshot the runway on this a little bit. It's not as difficult as I thought. I'm going to just simply move to North Carolina and be close to Meg. And he said, no, you're not. I said, why? And he said, because you're unfit to be a father. His ratings dropped significantly. But I said, why? And he said, because you don't know how to be a father. You stay here with us and we will teach you how to be a father. People like you taught me how to set goals. The difference between an intention and versus an ambition. A goal is something that I can see. It's got to be doable, it's got to be believable, it's got to be measurable, and it's got to have a date. You taught me that I could call that little girl Wednesday and Sunday nights for 14 years to stay active in her life. You taught me that I could take every other weekend, every other holiday, every other, and change that to 2 weeks of summer and make it work for her and make it work for me. Those were things that I had, those were unfamiliar actions, beliefs. Everything about that was brand new to me. But I had learned that I can survive by taking appropriate action. Those examples carried over into all of my relationships. My dad and I were not close from day one until about 2 years before he died, 2.5 years. He was one of these men that just kind of gradually, his body just kept shutting down a little bit at a time. And I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and we never left him in the hospital by himself. there was always somebody with him. And frequently I had the graveyard. And one night I was praying, I just said, you know, God, it isn't right that I got to carry this the rest of my life, and that he goes wherever he's going. And if he remembers it, it's not a good deal. So why don't you tell me what to say so we can put this all behind us? And everything I thought of, he had to say, oh, you're the best son anybody ever had. Well, that just isn't true. When I was drinking, this man disowned me twice. Not once, but twice. And here I'm expecting him to throw his arms around me and say, oh, God, Jeff, you're still the greatest. Wasn't going to happen. But he had a seizure, grand mal, really a bad one. And the process was that I had to go over and put my arm under his shoulders and then just go like this and say, Mac, breathe. Just breathe, Mac. Keep breathing, Mac. And I did that. I will tell you that every muscle in my body was burning from standing like that. I don't know how long it lasted. I have no idea. But when he finally opened his eyes, he looked at me and there was love in his eyes. And I was free to give him love in return. And from that moment, he and I had the best relationship. I mean, I'll tell you right now, if he walked in the door, I could love him and give him a hug, but he still doesn't get best friend status. I can love him, but I don't necessarily have to bring him into the elite group. On the other hand, he died in 2003. My mom died in 2011. After he died, I said, Pat, I'm your oldest son. Anything you need or anything you want, you come to me, and I'll either get it or I will take you. Now, she was healthy. She was blind in one eye and deaf in one ear from an accident that, I think she was in her 50s. She lost her hearing, and she was 83 when he died, 82, 83, something like that. And she had macular degeneration. So one eye was pretty dark and the other was blind. And she was not able to drive like she used to, but she loved to go. And so we went out for breakfast, we went out for lunch, we went out for dinner, we went to movies, we went to plays. Her brother lived in West Virginia and was dying of cancer. I will tell you, I loved that man. He and I drank tons of alcohol together in Los Angeles when I was out there. And he got sober 3 years before me. When I called him and said, I got 2 months sober, he sent me every document, approved, unapproved books that he had read about staying sober and about living life to the fullest. I loved the man dearly. And she said, will you take me to see Tom before he dies? And I said, absolutely. So we got on a plane in Des Moines and flew to West Virginia, spent about 4 days there. The last night we were there, we went out for dinner and we got home, and his wife said to Mom, you stay here, I want to talk to you. Jeff, will you help Tom in the house? And I said, sure. So we got him in the house, and he sat on his bed, and I took his shoes off, and I hung his jacket up, and I put his feet up on the bed and, fluffed some pillows. And we sat down and we had the nicest talk about the fun we had drinking in LA and about the life that we had sober. And you know what? We both cried because we love each other. And we knew exactly what had happened to him, and we knew exactly what could happen to me. And it was one of the most moving experiences that I've ever had. And then my mom died, and you know what? It was sad. But you people had taught me how to prepare for things like this, and I didn't have to drink. I was angry when my dad died. I don't know why, but I was still angry about something, and I remember it was okay. He's dead and he can't hurt me anymore. My mom and I were like, best pals. I was her guy and she was my gal. We did everything together. I never dreamt I'd have a friendship like that with her. Just wasn't possible, but we had it. A year later, I'm sitting in a meeting and the topic is gratitude, and it dawned on me, God gave me an 8-year living amends to help my mom, to show her that I wasn't the bum, I wasn't the bad guy that she raised for 39 years. You know what? I don't get gifts like that very often. This program is just remarkable. in everything that it has given me. Steps 1, 2, and 3. You know, honest, open, willing. I got them when my daughter left. Steps 4 through 9. I got those when my sponsor said, "You're unfit to be a father. You stay here and we'll teach you how to be a father." It took a couple, 3, 4 years to go through those steps and to get some comfort with them, to get where I was willing to look at them and say, I can embrace this lifestyle. Steps 10, 11, and 12. I get to practice the first 9 steps. I've learned how to be sociable. I've learned how to talk without the F-bomb every third word. I've learned how to be appropriate, responsible. Today when I tell you I'll be here, Karen, I showed up. And where I come from, there's a way of appreciating speakers. If Wallace was going to be the speaker and you and I were talking, say, who's the speaker tonight? Say McLaughlin. One of you would say, show up anyway. It won't be much. You know, that's just how the humor and the lifestyle is. And it's okay to be able to laugh at myself and say, come anyway. I haven't got anything really important to say, but I'll be, hopefully enjoyable. That's who I am today. That's who I want to be. I like to say that AA gave me permission to give myself permission to be who I'm capable of being today. I've learned to trust people because I know that in these rooms, I don't ever have to be alone. I never have to be needy. If I ask for help, I'll be happy, and whoever I ask will be happy when we're successful together. I never, ever, ever experienced that until I got here. My second sponsor gave me a centering prayer when he told me I couldn't move to North Carolina. And it goes like this. Some of you may have a little card that I give away. And it says, thank you, God, for things exactly as they are. Seek the unseen in the seen. And what that has taught me is when I'll slow my life down to the point where I can appreciate right this minute, I can see God and security in every facet of my life. I don't ever have to be afraid because I'll be doing something with or for somebody, and I'm somebody. I can just be relaxing and having a good hour for myself. But that's an action, and I don't have to be ashamed of doing that today. I just got involved in a committee last week here. I'm looking forward to being in a part of that committee. It's going to be a great life. I'm excited about that. I don't have history here. I've got history in AA, but it's my job to go out and make history by getting to know each one of you. I'm good with faces, but until I do an activity with each one of you, the Rolodex rusted to a stop years ago, and it just isn't firing up because I moved. I want to thank each of you for being here tonight, and thank you for inviting me to speak.